Now, the reason why I did this one, I've got half Za'atar on one side, half cheese on the other, is my little hack is I like to fold them in half. Or if I have one of each, then I'll put one bread on top of the other, but that seems a little much for today. Now, let's taste test. Hi guys, and welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're going to be making sort of a Middle Eastern flatbread called Manakish. It's so delicious. You can make them big or small if you want to share, if you want it all to yourself. We're also going to be making a Za'atar spice blend. So Za'atar is a really traditional Middle Eastern spice, and it's actually a blend of lots of different spices. So if you can't actually find Za'atar blend in a store near you, I'm going to show you today how you can make it with probably most of the spices that you already have at home. The first thing that we're going to do if we're making a flatbread is start with the dough. It's also going to need about 90 minutes to rise, so I want to get that started right away. So let's run through the ingredients. The first ingredients that we're gonna need for the dough, of course, we need some all-purpose white flour, a little bit of oil. You could use vegetable oil. I'm gonna be using olive oil today. A tiny bit of sugar, a little bit of salt to taste, our dry active yeast to make it rise, and then of course we need a little bit of water. We've got about a half a cup of water in here for today. We want the water to be lukewarm, that way it's warm enough to activate the yeast, but we don't want it to be boiling because we don't want it to be too hot to kill the yeast. Today we're going to be seasoning our mayonnaise two different ways, one with cheese and another one with a nice Za'atar spice as well. For today's recipe, this is actually one that I'm trying out for the first time at my home. I've had this a ton before, but it's the first time that I'm actually making it. And I did a bit of research and I found a few really great resources. So I'll link those ones down below. I've pulled from different blogs and different experts in the dish. That way we can come up with the perfect recipe for the dough, the Za'atar spice, and how to cook it. Up first, we're gonna activate our dry active yeast. So first thing what we're gonna do is put 1 full tablespoon of dry active yeast into our bowl. Again, since I am using a few different recipes to sort of perfect this dish, I am gonna have them all linked down below. To go along with our dry active yeast, we're also gonna add in 1 teaspoon of sugar. And then the last thing that we need, of course, to activate that yeast is that lukewarm water. Now carefully pouring that in, that way the yeast doesn't go everywhere. And give that just a little bit of a mix. Now we're gonna let this sit for about 10 minutes until it starts to bubble up and get a little bit frothy and foamy. And while we're waiting for it to fully activate, we can start getting the rest of the dough all together. The smell is very nostalgic. It brings me back to my university days when my roommates and I used to make homemade pizzas at home. Okay, that's well mixed. I'm gonna set this to the side and then we'll start getting everything ready to go for the rest of the dough. Unlike last time when I made dough for my dumplings, instead of using my stand mixer today, I'm going to attempt to mix it by hand. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link it somewhere above wherever it appears so you can see how I made dough for dumplings in a stand mixer. But today we're going the old school way. The first thing we're gonna need is some flour. We're actually gonna use 2 cups of flour. Now I said this before, when I'm making a recipe that I've made tons of times before, or if I'm just cooking from home, making whatever I want, I don't usually use my measuring cups. But because I'm following someone else's recipe and it's the first time I'm making it, I do want to make it as precise as I can. Okay, so now we got 2 cups of flour in there. If you were counting, that was 4, but I'm using half of a measuring cup. Next thing we need is just a pinch of salt, about a tablespoon, or sorry, teaspoon, not a tablespoon. Teaspoon of salt, then a few tablespoons of oil. The recipe I'm using for calls for about 3 tablespoons. Okay, so it's time to add our yeast into our dough. We've got a nice frothy texture on the yeast, which lets me know that it is activated. And then we can start to mix everything up all together. We're gonna go straight in with the hands. Okay, now we need we're gonna knead this until it looks like a nice, smooth ball of dough. And again, just like when we made dumplings, we're gonna get a good workout. If you notice your dough is sticking to your surface, you can flour it a little bit. I actually am not having that problem, probably because of the oil that's in the dough. And I don't wanna add too much flour to the dough, otherwise we'll be kneading all day. All right, that looks pretty good. I think that's about as good as we're gonna get. Okay, I've got my clean bowl here. I'm just gonna put a little bit of oil just so it doesn't stick. Gently put that dough inside and then just cover it. You could use paper towel. I'm just gonna use a tea towel for now. Hi, Milo. Okay, and set this over to the side and let it rest for about 90 minutes. To make the za'atar, we just need 5 ingredients. So we're gonna quickly go through those. We've got some ground cumin. We also have some thyme. If you don't happen to have thyme, you could substitute in oregano as well. A little bit of ground coriander seed, some sumac. Now this one can be a little bit tricky to find. I was able to find it just at my regular grocery store. It wasn't with the other spices, it's in the ethnic section, if you will, okay? But you can find sumac at your grocery store. And then some toasted sesame seeds. So these are just regular old sesame seeds. I just gave them a quick little toast beforehand. So I put them in a pan, no oil or anything in there, just at a lower heat, toss them around. And now they got a really nice, rich, toasty flavor. For this recipe, all we're doing is putting an equal amount of everything. So about a tablespoon of each of these ingredients. The last thing we're gonna need is just a little bit of salt to taste, maybe even half of a teaspoon, just a little bit of a pinch. Okay, so the za'atar mix is done. And if you just want za'atar, then here you go, you've got your mix. Because we're actually gonna be putting this on the bread, I don't wanna leave it just like this, otherwise it won't stay on the bread for the full time. So what I'm going to do is add in a little bit of olive oil and mix it together. I just need enough oil until it kind of forms a paste. That way, when I put it onto the dough right before it's baked, it stays put even when the dough is cooked. The last little bit of prep that we need to do is actually grate the cheese that'll go on our za'atar cheese bread. So today I'm gonna be using halloumi cheese. There are other traditional cheeses that you can sometimes find, but this is the closest that I could get. We're looking for a semi-soft to a soft cheese. That way it'll melt really nicely on the bread. If you can't find halloumi, you could also use a mozzarella, and that is really soft as well. It'll melt nicely. We're looking for something a little bit lighter. That way when we pair it with the za'atar, it's the za'atar that shines. Okay, if you haven't had halloumi cheese before, we're gonna do a really quick taste test just so we can get a better feel for what it's like. I've actually never cooked with it before. I've had it on things, I've had it at restaurants, but this is my first time. Wow, I'm a cheese fiend, so I'm really into this. Halloumi is nice and soft. It is quite salty, not as salty as maybe like a feta, but when I opened up the package, it did come in a bit of a brine. It's also got a little bit of a give to it, and it's kind of that squeaky cheese. If you've had cheese curds, it's got that squeaky texture when you chew it. Needless to say, it's delicious. So let's grate this up and then we'll get going. It's been about 90 minutes since we finished off the dough, and it has just been sitting there and rising. So if we take a look, it's definitely at least doubled in size. We're gonna take the dough out as carefully as we can, and then we're actually going to start portioning it to create each of our small little flatbreads. I am gonna start by cutting through first and just portioning them into sort of some smaller pieces, then we're going to roll those ones out. I've rolled out a few of the small breads. Now what I'm going to do is actually place them on my baking tray. Traditionally, these would be cooked in a beautiful wood oven. Unfortunately, I don't have one of those, but this is going to do for now for trying to make this at home. I'm gonna try and space these out because I do want them to rise a little bit. Maybe 3 on this one for now. And then I'm gonna actually cover this and let this sit a little bit, probably about 20 minutes, and then it'll rise a little bit more. Once the 20 minutes is up, then we'll put the toppings on and throw them in the oven. So while we're waiting for them to rise, I'm actually gonna preheat the oven to 450. Actually, no, 425. Okay, it has been about 20 minutes. I have let the dough rise just slightly. It's not going to rise a ton. It has already risen a lot when it was just in that big bowl. So I have 2 pans here ready to go, and then I have another one that's still rising in the back. Now, admittedly, the first few that I rolled out, I think I rolled out slightly too thin. So those ones might not be coming out perfect, but these ones are looking good. I rolled them out originally about a 1/4 inch thick, but what's nice about this is now it is still a little bit poofy. So when I touch it, it definitely has some bounce back, which is great. What I'm gonna do right now is actually take my fingers and kind of press down and create some little indentations in the dough. This will help to hold on to the toppings, and hopefully it'll make sure that they stick and kind of absorb all of that flavor in there. Once that's done, I'm just going to cover everything in the toppings that I want. So I do still have that halloumi cheese that's been finely grated and our Za'atar blend, which is great. How you do it is totally up to you. I'll do a few that are just cheese, some that are just Za'atar, and I might do some that are a little bit of a mix of the two. Now it's time to dress our Manakish. Okay, my first batch of the Za'atar bread is in the oven right now. So it goes in the oven at 425 for about 10 minutes or until it starts to get golden brown towards the outside. I've got my second batch right here and kind of an idea of how you can mix and match. So I've got just a Za'atar bread. This one is just a cheese bread. This one actually has some of the last little bit of the Za'atar paste underneath and then the cheese on top. I even took some of those toasted sesame seeds that I had left over and just sprinkled them on top. That way we're not wasting, and it still adds to that delicious flavor profile. So it's only a few more minutes and those ones that are in the oven will be done, and then finally we can have our taste test. After about 10 minutes, this is where we're at. We've got our first batch of the bread that's just come out of the oven. Now, admittedly, like I said earlier, I think I actually rolled some of these out a little bit too thin. So the bread is a little thin on this one. I prefer it a little bit thicker. So I would say, I don't know, 1/4 inch, 1/3 of an inch. You would want it a little bit fluffier than this, but it does still have some give. The center is really nice and soft. The outside edge right now is really crispy. Now, the reason why I did this one, I've got half Za'atar on one side, half cheese on the other, is my little hack is I like to fold them in half. Or if I have one of each, then I'll put one bread on top of the other, but that seems a little much for today. Now, let's taste test. Ooh, that is good. Let's go for maybe one more bite. Oh my gosh, that tastes so good. The cheese has lost just a little bit of the saltiness, which is nice, so it's not too overpowering. And when you've got the za'atar and the cheese together, it's fantastic. Now, za'atar is not for the faint of heart. It is definitely gonna get a little bit messy, although we did mix it with the oil to create that paste. Once you start to eat it, the spices do start to fall off. So just anticipate a delicious mess. So good. The dough isn't quite perfect. There's something, it's not quite as fluffy as I want it. Maybe I should have just let it rise a little bit more. But the flavor is there and it is awesome. I'll definitely give these another go and keep you guys posted. Okay. Enough. I need to stop and wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining me in my kitchen today. If you do decide to recreate this dish, please let me know and tag me on any of my social media so I can see how you guys did it. Or if you've made this before and have any tips on how I could perfect it, either with the dough or any other toppings that I could put on it instead, let me know as well. I'm excited to keep making new things in my kitchen and branching out a little bit further. Comment down below what you're interested in learning how to make. I'm also interested in learning how to make pretty much everything, so let me know what you want to see me do next, and I cannot wait to continue learning in my kitchen with you. Bye guys.